Close your eyes. Now open them. You don't have to consciously tell your brain to process the light hitting your retinas. Vision is an automatic, involuntary biological function. You can't simply switch it off. At least, that's what medical science dictates. But then there is patient BT. When she first walked into a psychiatric clinic for psychotherapy, she was 33 years old. 15 years earlier, she had suffered a traumatic accident. Following that accident, her vision slowly deteriorated until she was diagnosed with complete cortical blindness. For over a decade, she had lived in total darkness, relying entirely on a guide dog to navigate the world. But blindness wasn't the reason she was seeking psychiatric help. BT had been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Her mind contained more than 10 distinct personality states, each with different names, ages, genders, and languages. Her existence was defined by two seemingly incurable conditions. Her psychological self was fractured into multiple identities, and her physical brain was incapable of processing light. 4 years into her therapy sessions, something happened that defied medical explanation. Right after a session, while BT was in one of her adolescent male identity states, she looked down at a magazine cover and read a word out loud. A patient with a 15-year medical history of diagnosed cortical blindness cannot suddenly read. The biological hardware of the visual system doesn't spontaneously repair itself after a decade of complete dormancy. Yet, over the next few months, the phenomenon escalated. Her vision began to return, but only for certain personalities. Within a matter of seconds, she could switch from a sighted state to being completely blind again, depending entirely on which identity was currently active. Her doctors were faced with a severe medical contradiction. Either this patient was executing an incredibly elaborate decade-long lie, or her psychological state was somehow overriding her biological vision in real time. To understand what was happening, her doctors looked to a condition known as conversion disorder. In the late 19th century, Sigmund Freud studied this under the term hysteria. He observed that extreme psychological trauma could convert into genuine physical symptoms. This is not malingering. They aren't consciously faking. Their brain generates real deficits without their conscious awareness. To prove whether BT was faking, or if her brain was truly blocking her sight, her doctors subjected her to an objective neurological interrogation called a Visual Evoked Potentials, or VEP test. During a VEP test, the patient stares at a flashing checkerboard screen. Scalp electrodes then measure the electrical activity traveling to the visual cortex. This test relies on an involuntary physical reflex. If the eyes are working and the visual cortex fires, it means the raw data of sight is successfully reaching the brain. You cannot consciously suppress this electrical response. This chart shows the pattern-evoked potentials recorded while BT was in one of her sighted personality states. The sharp peaks of the blue and red lines prove that her primary visual pathway is intact and producing healthy electrical activity. This chart shows the VEP data captured moments later, after she switched into a blind personality state. The waveform is flattened and chaotic. In the exact same brain, staring at the exact same flashing checkerboard, the pattern-evoked potential has vanished. Visual data entered her eyes, but was blocked before reaching the visual cortex. Researchers pinpointed the exact block, the thalamus, the brain's visual gatekeeper. To protect her psyche from trauma, her brain commanded the thalamus to shut the gate, intercepting the raw data. The blindness that defined BT's life for 15 years existed as a protective psychological firewall, executed with ruthless efficiency by her own neurobiology. Through continued psychotherapy and hypnotherapy, BT began to process the trauma causing her mind to fracture. As she did, her visual capability began to return across more of her personality states. The progression of her returning sight was highly unusual. She could recognize complex whole words on a page well before she was able to process individual letters, and her depth perception remained unstable even as her visual acuity improved. This specific top-down recovery sequence proved that her blindness was driven by a high-level cognitive block. As she slowly resolved her psychological trauma, the biological gate at the thalamus was permitted to remain open. For decades, much of the psychiatric community viewed dissociative identity disorder with skepticism. Many critics dismiss the condition as an elaborate form of subconscious role-playing or a cultural artifact influenced by therapists. This fMRI scan shows how conversion disorders manifest in the brain. The blue areas indicate suppressed neural activity, while the red and green show increased connectivity. BT's case provided biological proof that different personality states alter the early sensory information processing in the brain. The strict division between mental and physical illness is a scientific myth. Psychological trauma is in fact a tangible physical force, powerful enough to sever the neurological wires of our own reality.